Our next speaker is Alastair Thompson, who's head of Scoop Media, which is the largest independent news platform in New Zealand. And he's faced some challenges and changing his ownership model. So welcome, Alastair.
G'day everybody. It's nice to be back. I was here some time ago, 2002 actually, talking about the role of the media in the second Gulf War, and it was just in the sort of few months after the war started, and I was talking about the misinformation campaigns that led up to the war, and it was one of, I mean, I really enjoyed, it was a sort of like a lunchtime speaker series or something, and it turned into a really nice article, which is one of my best pieces of work. So I feel very comfortable here. And if you want to follow me, these days I do most of my journalism on Twitter. The world of media is changing very rapidly. But I mean, I'll just give you a little bit of background about my own role in the media. I was a print journalist originally. And I started out in the Dominion newspaper at the age of 20 and spent a decade in printed newspapers and magazines from the and through to the mid-1990s. And it was already pretty apparent there that the writing was on the wall for journalism as a profession, even like by 95. So I decided at that point I might study law instead, and studied law up until 1999, and then some things happened which made me stop studying law and I set up Scoop. And Scoop, you probably, I mean, has everybody here seen Scoop? So I probably don't need to explain what we do, but there's a little aspect of it which I think is probably worth understanding. So our approach to sort of curating the news is quite deliberate. And I really enjoyed the remarks of Dr. Longhurst earlier, where he was talking about the sort of the philosophical basis to this discussion and the theological basis to this discussion, and the role of truth and of secrecy. So our approach to information has always been to pursue truth. I mean, that's the natural objective of journalism, I suppose, but also to oppose secrecy. So we've always attempted to try and tell those stories which are not being told, to illuminate that which is being withheld from the public, to talk about the people in West Papua, to talk about the conflict in Gaza and the stories of the people in Gaza and so forth. In the early days, to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in the lead up to the Gulf War, to talk about the lies that were already being told. There was very widespread reporting on the lies that were being told in the lead up to the war before it started. So there's that. Now, when we process material on Scoop, we triage it, we filter it, and we decide whether or not it's irrelevant. And we tag it and we source it, and we publish it in its entirety with its metadata, so that when you see a piece of information on Scoop, it's actionable. You know what its source is, you know where it came from. By comparison with that, news information which is published on the web these days is not that reliable. You can't tell where it came from. You can search for phrases and attempt to try to figure out what the source of the information is, but it's almost impossible to have any degree of reliability that it's actually accurate. I noticed just the other day in the reporting of the TPP in the TV3 news report at the beginning of the bulletin, in the voiceover, the person said that the government was going to save $247 million in tariffs, which is just nonsense. So, and I mean, that was obviously in the script. It had got through the people. So I mean, there's problems there in terms of the standards of the media. So the remarks about the surveillance society. I personally have felt intimidated as a journalist as soon as I realised how widespread this was. And when we saw Andrea Vance, the Andrea Vance GCSB Kitteridge report inquiry, it became apparent that a minister can get sacked for having a conversation with a reporter, and for that being obvious via metadata alone. So he was convicted and lost his ministerial position purely out of metadata. And he was a minister, so it's about as high as you can get in terms of authority. I'd also very strongly endorse Valerie's suggestion that the only sensible response in these circumstances is some form of collective action, because the power imbalance and the power asymmetry and information asymmetry that we're experiencing can only be addressed through collective action. So tonight here there's a bunch of people that I like a great deal, including Jan, who's over there, who's been a great supporter of Scoop for several years, and especially in the last sort of 9 months or so. And my mother, Margaret, who's the other trustee of the Scoop Foundation, and my wife, Wendy. And today we sold our house. So we're feeling really quite pleased with ourselves, which is partly why this speech is somewhat impromptu. So today we launched this. So we launched a campaign to help establish a solution to the news crisis. So we've been doing this for like 9 months or so, but this is the denouement of this exercise, and I really would strongly endorse you to, strongly ask you to have a look at what we're doing and to talk to me over the weekend, and potentially I will be suggesting various ways that you might be able to help us. That's the actual page. If you click on that video, you'll see Margaret and myself trying valiantly to sort of be on a video, somewhat unsuccessfully. So, what news crisis? Well, this is a graph which shows the news crisis. You'll see there that that's advertising revenue of newspapers in the States, but it's exactly the same everywhere, and that line is steepening in terms of its decline, and there's no real revenue response to that at all. And if you see there, it's been declining since, I don't know, the 90s. And the news is the quality of the news that we are receiving as members of the public now is being produced maybe by 1/3 the number of journalists as it was in 2000, pretty much throughout the world. And but we don't feel as though we've got a lack of information, because we have all sorts of other news sources of information. But as Donald Rumsfeld famously said, the real problem in the world, the things that get you, are the unknown unknowns. Like, we can know the knowns, there's the known knowns, and then there's the unknown knowns. But the unknown unknowns are the things that really screw up society. So, who will save us from Godzilla? The news crisis. This is the basic problem. The advertising, I mean, what is Godzilla? I mean, this is actually the point is Godzilla is who is Godzilla? What is the crisis? The challenge that we face comes from economic disruption of the advertising markets. And New Zealand publishers are particularly vulnerable because of scale. The markets which advertising are purchased in are global, and lots of programmatic advertising, purchasing implementations are being managed out of Australia and Singapore. And the bread and butter in online marketing is being done by robots, mainly. This here was announced yesterday, and it's a partnership between all four major New Zealand media companies, because TVNZ, Fairfax, NZME, and MediaWorks, and Bauer as well. Although I don't know if Bauer's included in this yet, but it's yep, TVNZ's in there. And the problem with robotic advertising purchasing is that it's essentially a model which is designed by the customer, and the only way to increase the value is to decrease the supply of advertising. And New Zealanders are now able to be advertised everywhere they are in the world. So you don't have to advertise on New Zealand websites. You can advertise on Facebook and Google and on The Guardian and basically anywhere. But also, in addition to that, every time you visit any website, the website records that you've been to it, and then when you come back to any one of these publishers which is serving ads, they can then give you the ad for the website that you've been to in the past. So if you notice that you're just constantly seeing the same ads all the time, that's because of these systems. And the problem is that the volume of advertising is just going through the roof. So these robots have taken over the markets, and they're disrupting the advertising agencies as much as they're disrupting the media companies. And I mean, essentially the price just falls. The price of advertising has been falling continuously. We were here when digital advertising sort of started in 2004, and it reached its peak in about 2007, and it's been in decline ever since, and last year it fell off a cliff. And as a result of it falling off a cliff last year, we've seen some dramatic things. So MediaWorks is obviously slimming itself down at pace and shutting down Campbell Live. Maori TV has been shedding journalists for slightly different reasons, I must admit. Bauer Media has been working hard on reducing its editorial costs and trying to get people to sign sort of very, very unpleasant contracts. NBR has announced that it has an intention to focus on digital subscriptions as opposed to advertising. Both Fairfax and NZME have had redundancy rounds in the past 6 months involving respectively about 20% of their staff. And Fairfax announced that they were disestablishing 180 positions and they were going to establish roughly the same number. However, I think about 60 or 70 of those are not fulfilled. And the reason that they're not fulfilled is that digital advertising and revenue in particular has fallen faster than expected, and print advertising has been taking a big hit too. So for example, the Progressive Enterprises, which runs Countdown Supermarkets, is one of the biggest print advertisers in the country, especially newspaper advertisers, because they advertise in all the little local newspapers. They decided to put all of their advertising online, to stop all print advertising, and that's $6 million out of the budgets of NZME and Fairfax. And in practical terms, that's about 150 journalists' jobs. But they can't report it because it's not possible for the news media, who sell confidence and strength and vitality, to report on their own crises. So the level of knowledge of these things is quite diminished. So that graph there was basically saying there's 9 billion impressions, and I mean, I don't know, the number of impressions that are available is going through the roof. The only way that New Zealand publishers are going to make any money out of the internet is if they operate as a cartel and they reduce dramatically the supply of advertising, and if they ask the government and corporate organisations to place money deliberately within New Zealand publishers in order to support the publication of news. But I can't see them doing that, because that would be an admission of failure. This is we did a presentation on content. So native content. So native content is essentially placed editorial, and you may notice that newspapers and online websites are full of content which sometimes you can't be so sure why it's there, whether it's actually a news article, whether it's a piece of propaganda, whether it's an advert. Quite often it is an advert, and I think that's probably slipping into print in ways that we're not really recognising either. So this is interesting. At the same time that we have this massive disruption in news, access to news is perceived to be a public right. So Dr. Longhurst was talking about this earlier. It's philosophically perceived to be a public right, and it's in the interests of society for it to happen, and the public believe that their access to news is a public right. However, it's not. There's rights to freedom of information, but there's no access to news. There's no funding for news. News companies are for-profit corporations, with the exception of TVNZ. TVNZ, like the other for-profit corporations, has a board, and their only objective, or their primary objective, let's say it, because it's not the only objective of TVNZ, but it's probably the only objective of the other publications, is to maximise shareholder value. And if maximising shareholder value involves deception and publishing propaganda and publishing stuff which is nonsense, and publishing clickbait and sticking cats and sort of randomly in everywhere, then they will. But this is an Action Stations survey. 3,500 people, I think, were surveyed in this survey, and 99% said that they believed that it was a right. If it's a right, we need to start legislating for it. We need to fund it, and we need to ensure that we have it. There's various ways that could be achieved, but we're not even having the debate at the moment. People also believe overwhelmingly, 91%, that it's very, very important to have access to information, to have to have democracy. So it's not like the people don't understand this. They know this very, very clearly. And this question was why do people feel, what do they think the causes of, what are they most concerned about? And they're most concerned about profit-driven and political interference in the news. I'm just going to come back to that bit. So, this is a presentation that I gave to the Law Librarians Association a wee while ago, and the central bit that I'm just going to talk about is just 3 points. So there's basically a 3-stage plan for Operation Chrysalis, which is what we've been doing for the past 9 months, so since December. So, I mean, and the idea of setting up a Scoop Foundation actually started 3 years ago, and I mean it's now complete. So as of September the 1st, we initiated the trust, the Scoop Foundation for Public Interest Journalism, charitable trust. We applied for charitable status, and we transferred all of the assets of Scoop, the Scoop Publishing Company, into that trust on the 16th of September. And we launched a campaign called Take Back the News at the time, which members and contributors. So essentially, it's trying to build a sort of collectivist base of people that can try to start working together to build a new news infrastructure. But there's three principles underlying it. First of all, there's one of truth. So we knew that when we started this, that if we were going to set up a foundation for journalism, we're not going to get any money from anyone unless people start to understand what the problem is. And that involves trying to get the media talking about the news crisis. And so in January we launched this thing called the State of New Zealand News Media. And we're going to relaunch it shortly, and we'd like your help because we're basically going to write a whole lot of op-eds about it. So we want as many people who have a view about news and the news that they're consuming to give us their own views on the answers to some fairly simple questions about what they think about news and what they think the solutions ought to be. We also ran this Save Campbell Live campaign, which so did Action Station, who Laura's here from Action Station and we'll be talking tomorrow. The Save Campbell Live public movement was twice as big as Red Peak, it set the social media universe of activism completely on fire, and for good reason, because John Campbell is a broadcaster who has a massive amount of empathy and who genuinely helps people, and also a massive amount of integrity. He rates twice as high in terms of favourability and trustworthiness as any other broadcaster, and yet he lost his job, and we have to wonder why. So part of the reason why, I'm just a slight diversion. The chief executives of the 3 major news companies in New Zealand are Simon Tong, who was formerly the CEO of Paymark. So that was an FPOS processing company. Jane Hastings, who's the CEO of NZME, was formerly the deputy CEO, I think, of Sky City Casino. And Mark Weldon was obviously the former CEO of NZX. None of them have a clue about anything related to media. So, I mean, we can't rely on them believing in ethics. And in a recent interview, Simon Tong, for example, said came here, was rather surprised to find that there was a whole lot of people working here at Fairfax who believed that, or who felt that journalism was a calling, was a vocation as opposed to a job. Well, journalism's been a vocation for probably at least a decade, maybe 15 years, because it hasn't been able to pay anybody properly. I was able to get paid the same amount of money in real terms, 50 cents a word, in 1988 as I would get now. And it's just not possible in a million years to make a living out of it. And it was easier to sell copy back then. So the second obstacle is trust. If the media, the public, this is one of the things which has struck me quite strongly after over the last 9 months, is that the level of antipathy that people feel towards the media is enormous. And it's not just the members of the public, politicians and business leaders, pretty much everybody feels like the media aren't doing their job properly, that they're twisting the truth, that they're manipulating things in various ways, and don't particularly like us. And we're very thick-skinned, so we just sort of don't notice that. But it does make us like sitting ducks when it comes to trying to address problems like these ones that we're currently facing. So we were thinking about this, and we'd been for some time. Scoop hasn't really been a business. We haven't been profitable. We were profitable in 2007. I think was the last year that we were profitable, and we've lost a reasonably large amount of money since 2007, and that's been generously provided by various people that that we're grateful to for their contribution, and a fairly substantial amount of money from my family. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to be a business on the one hand, but also one of the reasons people don't trust media companies is that they when they think media companies, they see Rupert Murdoch, they see Conrad Black, they see, John Ailes. Media companies are just full of manipulating, powerful, lying bastards, really. And so that is the positioning of news media organisations. Now, the exception to that, of course, is The Guardian, which is owned by a charitable trust. And hence the structure of the Scoop Foundation is essentially that of the Scott Trust, although the Scott Trust was founded with large amounts of money, and the Scoop Foundation is founded with no money at all. Which comes to the third point, sustainability. So in order for us to try to continue to do what we're doing, we had to have a solution to the problem of sustainability. And we actually had this idea of ethical paywalls that we've introduced. I'm not sure if has anybody, how many people here are familiar with this change that we've made? Okay, so briefly, well, that's about half of you. That's pretty good. It's pretty impressive. So basically, it's like taking Creative Commons but making it enforceable. So what we've said to corporate organisations and to business organisations that use us, well, we changed our terms and conditions of use. And our terms and conditions of use state that if you use us commercially, and that means reading us or accessing us for work, or so if you routinely find yourself on Scoop to do fact checking, to spell people's names or to look up companies or so forth, then you need to pay us. And we've got a sliding scale which starts at $400 a year for organisations which have less than 20 people, and it ranges up to about $4,000 for organisations which are substantially over 4,000 people. So Auckland Council, for example, is going to probably pay us $5,000 a year to read Scoop. Auckland Council is also the biggest contributor of press releases of any particular organisation to us, so that seems entirely fair. We're not going to charge for the publishing of press releases because A, we want to have editorial control over what press releases we publish, And second, and that means we don't want to be under any obligation to edit them or delete them or correct them if asked to. That's not to say that we won't and we don't do so from time to time, but if somebody wants to try and remove or scrub the record of what they're saying, then we don't participate in that. But it's also because that's where the main value is. I mean, the fundamental problem that Scoop has is that the vast value that it gives to the community that it serves is done through things that it provides for free. So firstly, the publication of press releases, and secondly, people just reading the website. So when we try to sell people things like advertising, we're trying to sell advertising against, I don't know, these global multinational corporations. When we're trying to sell media monitoring services, again, we're trying to sell them versus big multinational corporations with very, very high-spec technology and so forth. So, and unless there's some reason that people have to pay us, they don't. So we've introduced this, and people have started paying us. Now, the task that we set out at the beginning of the year, when we started in Operation Chrysalis in December, basically had a series of stop points. If at any point that we'd failed, we would have had to shut down our commercial operations. We basically had to rebuild the driving engine of a train whilst it was going along and turning it into a new form of propulsion. So, I don't know, replacing a steam engine with an electric engine on a train which is going along whilst we're running out of fuel. And remarkably, we seem to succeed in doing that. So in May we launched this, and we now have MFAT, Parliament, MB, Department of Internal Affairs, State Services Commission, Treasury has recently agreed to become a subscriber. Who else? AUT University, Russell McVeigh, DLA Piper, Bell Gully, a bunch of law firms. And increasingly recently a bunch of PR firms. So, and I mean, it's the first time in Scoop's history that we've had a product which is scalable and which we can actually sell. I mean, this past couple of weeks, We've taken on a new salesperson, they make appointments, they ring people up, and then they just make sales, and they make sales reasonably quickly. Now this is what the internet business is supposed to be like. And the justification for it, and the reason that we're succeeding, is because Scoop is relied upon by so many people in this country. So I mean, the fact that we've been doing this for 16 years means that we have more information which is reliable and accurate about the New Zealand news environment in our database, which is accessible by Google, than any other publisher. Now, what we're doing is perfectly able to be done by Fairfax, NZME, MediaWorks, and TVNZ, and even Radio New Zealand. They could just change their terms and conditions of use, and they could start charging businesses to pay them to listen to the radio. I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. Now, in the case of public broadcasters, there's probably some kind of a double dipping sort of effect that might come into play. But that's not the case for their website content, and it's not the case because they're not funded for their website content in the case of Radio New Zealand. So there's been, so far since we've done this, there's been a completely resounding silence from the other media companies about it. So this is the Scoop company. There's a sort of like there's a PDF that you can read which explains the foundation, and I'm quite happy to explain how the foundation works. And essentially there's a foundation which is the trustees, me and Margaret, and then there's a separate publishing company, and it's designed, the structure is designed to protect the organisation from editorial interference and to protect the organisation from editorial and commercial interference. And that concludes the formal bit. So, thank you.